What if the one message that could change your life never arrived? For 70 years, Margaret sat by her window, waiting. Every morning, she watched a postman walk up the street, his leather satchel swinging at his side. Every afternoon, she let out the same weary sigh as he passed her house without stopping. But one day, everything changed. One day, the letter came, and with it, a truth that had been buried for decades. Margaret Whitmore had once been young, bright-eyed, and in love. In 1942, when the world was at war, she had met William Carter, a young man with bright blue eyes and a smile that made her heart race. He wasn't the most handsome or the richest boy in town, but none of that mattered. William had something rare, a kindness that made people feel safe. They met in the town library, both reaching for the same book, A Tale of Two Cities. Their fingers brushed, their eyes met, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. "Looks like we have the same taste," he had said, flashing that easy smile. Margaret had blushed, pulling her hand back. "I guess we do." That afternoon, he waited outside the library, book in hand, and asked if she wanted to take a walk. That walk turned into hours of conversation, laughter, and an understanding that neither of them had felt before. Love came quickly, like a summer storm. They spent afternoons by the river, whispering dreams about the future. She imagined herself in a white dress, standing beside him at the altar. He spoke of a house by the sea, where they would sit on the porch and watch the waves roll in hand, but fate was cruel. The war did not wait for love. The draft came, and William was called away. On the morning he left, he pressed a silver locket into her palm. "Open it when you miss me," he whispered. Then he was gone. At first, letters arrived regularly, long, beautiful letters filled with love and longing. William wrote of cold nights, distant gunfire, and the faces of young men who barely understood what they were fighting for. He told her about his fellow soldiers, James, the boy from Kentucky who dreamed of running a bakery, and Thomas, who carried a picture of his newborn daughter everywhere he went. But he also wrote about their future. "When I come home, Maggie, we'll go to the ocean. We'll build our life, just as we planned." She clung to those words. They were her lifeline. Then the letters stopped. Weeks turned to months, months turned to years. Rumors of fallen soldiers spread through town like wildfire. But Margaret refused to believe them. Not William, not her William. Then, one day, a telegram arrived. "We regret to inform you." 12 words. That was all it took to shatter her world. She read the telegram over and over, trying to make sense of it. William was gone. Just like that. No goodbye. No explanation, just silence. Her parents tried to comfort her, but nothing could mend a broken heart. Days blurred into weeks, and before she knew it, years had passed. The town changed. Friends moved on, got married, had children. Life kept moving forward, but Margaret remained frozen in time. She never married, never left town. She became the woman in the little white house on the corner, the one who sat by the window every day, watching, waiting. Then, on an ordinary autumn morning, something extraordinary happened. The mailman, much younger than the ones before him, paused at her gate. His brow furrowed as he pulled an aged, yellowed envelope from his satchel. The paper was brittle, the ink faded, but the name was clear. Margaret Whitmore. Her hands trembled as she took the letter. The return address: U.S. Army Postal Service. The postmark: March 3, 1944, 70 years ago. A letter lost in the system, finally finding its way home. Margaret's breath hitched as she opened it. The handwriting was familiar, even after all these years. "My Maggie," it began. "If you're reading this, then I want you to know I made it. I survived, and I am coming home to you." Tears blurred the words as she read. William hadn't died in the war. He had survived. He had written to her, and she had never known. The final lines were the ones that broke her heart. "Wait for me. I will find you." But he never had, because this letter, the one that held her entire future, had never arrived. Until now. Margaret sat frozen, the letter trembling in her hands. Her mind raced. If William had survived, then where had he gone? What had happened to him? She spent days tracking down records, searching for answers. And finally, she found him. William Carter had returned from the war. But when he found no letters from her, when he thought she had moved on, he left. He built a life elsewhere. A wife, children, grandchildren. He had lived. And now, at 92 years old, he was in a nursing home, his memory fading. Margaret made her decision in an instant. She had spent her whole life waiting. Now, it was time to go. The nursing home was quiet, the scent of lavender and old books filling the air. Her heart pounded as she stepped into the room. William sat by the window, just as she had for 70 years. His hair was white, his body frail, but when he turned, his eyes, those bright blue eyes, were still the same. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then, Maggie, her breath hitched. "You remember me?" she whispered. He smiled. "I could never forget you." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she reached into her pocket, pulling out the aged, yellowed letter. "I got your message," she said softly. A pause, then a breathless chuckle. "Took you long enough." And just like that, 70 years melted away. Two souls, lost in time, finally found each other again. Margaret and William spent their final years side by side, making up for the time stolen from them. They laughed, they reminisced, and, one last time, they went to the ocean together. Some love stories don't end. Some letters, no matter how late, always find their way home.